Welcome to Kingsville, Ontario, where I'm meeting with Henry and Jeremy Denotter, who are grain farmers down here in southwest Essex County. And I've been following them around for the last year or so, seeing their operation from the standpoint of how they manage the cropping practice, tillage-wise, etc. And so Henry participated with a couple of other farmers from Ontario in an ag conference session in January, and now we're going around and doing essentially case studies with each of the farms so that we can bring the other generations into the conversation. So we're here to talk about how no-till applies in this farm, and no-till means different things to different people, and Henry and Jeremy will talk about what it means themselves. But first off, I just want you to sort of talk about the history of the farm here, Henry and Jeremy, where you and who's currently involved in the operation.
Well, the farm has been here for since the late '60s, and my parents started it, and we've basically transformed it over to what is doing today, about 2000. At that time, we had already bought some no-till equipment, and we were basically cutting down our tillage program, and looking at trying to improve it, and so now we're improving it even more, and that's Jeremy's taking on a lot of those particular tasks, because GPS equipment is a little bit above my head some days. I think you know it all, but then somebody comes over and reaches over your shoulder and just pushes a button on the screen, and everything happens that you wanted to happen. You've been struggling with, eh? But it's definitely a generation movement. It went from my dad to me, and from me, it's going to my boys.
Can we talk about the farm in terms of, what's the crop mix? What are the soil types and slopes that you're dealing with?
Well, we're on Brookston clay. That's the long of the short of it. And Brookston clay in nice flat fields, just like a dinner plate. A little edge around the outside. But a lot of the fields are tiled. We grow corn, wheat, and soybeans, and we've definitely dug into the cover crop mix back as much as 10 years ago when it was first being talked about a lot. And we kind of specialize in growing buckwheat. Buckwheat seems to do what we want. And we have a nice planting window, although this year it hasn't been a favorable planting window. We like to plant it after wheat. And it has its own little quirks that we have to address. But that has been work. We still grow some radishes and oats, but that's for those later fields that are coming off in October.
And the buckwheat is strictly as a cover crop, or it's for seed as well?
We try and harvest it. That's the plan. We want to make sure that we can get a good crop, and we'll take one day out of our fall harvest and try and harvest all the buckwheat.
And like, you're pretty much flat everywhere, right? In the fields that you have. But the soil types, are they varying very much at all, Jeremy?
Not a lot. We do have some sandy ground, but our general covered area that we work is mostly clay.
Can you guys sort of define, what does no-till mean to you guys?
We don't have a plow. We do not moldboard plow. So we have the planters do have a certain amount of tillage equipment on it, generally in the form of coulters. But the thing is too, we've really focused on row width. So 20-inch rows for everything. 20-inch row corn, 20-inch row soybeans. Wheat is still planted at narrow rows at 5.5, 6 inches, but we don't have wide rows, and so basically 1 inch out of 20 is getting some vertical tillage.
And we're going to talk about tillage in a minute in terms of what tillage you guys do. But in terms of sort of the ground that no-till, when you look at things like cost and the equipment arrangements that you need to have and time and labor, you're trying to do this pretty much with the two of you. Sometimes Derek is helping as well. But in terms of the acres, in terms of the equipment and stuff, no-till seems to be working for you.
Oh, definitely. It's we concentrate on one one type of planting piece and one type of fertilizer applying equipment, and the sprayer. The sprayer is a big part of our program, and so that we can define the labor. If you can go across the field at 120 feet at a time, it's definitely going to be much more cost effective than doing it at 60 feet at a time.
So last fall, Henry, you called me down here you wanted to show me something, and I came down, you took me to the field, and I thought I was going to cry because I saw this field after the unit had been through it, and I was quite shocked at how much tillage happened. And then you started to, pull the soil away and show me that it was really just every 20 inches, and that it did a lot of movement on the top, but it didn't go very deep. So talk about, both of you, where does tillage fit in your farm operation?
It's more of a practice of only when we need to. You should still technically work linemen. No sense throwing it on top. Not always does that happen. It's when we can do it properly, we do it as a necessity. It's not just, well, we have to do it. There are times we should do it, but we don't do it.
You're using these sort of two implements, one put on the back of the sulfur tank. So that is essentially placing fertilizer, correct?
Yeah, it's directed fertilizer placement.
And how many years are you sort of putting into that mix?
I think we've done off and on over the past like 6-7 years, we've done about 3 or 4 actual seasons where we've done significant acreage with the machine. It doesn't work all the time. Like hypothetically now, because we missed our window to plant buckwheat, I would like to be doing it now. There's still water in the fields.
Yes.
And we are what, the 10th or 11th of August today? Like ideally we would like to be switching the machine over, get that all done before we go to harvest, so we have all that ready, and then potentially put a cover crop on it and just walk away from it, leave it alone.
How many years in, like, when would tillage happen on fields, sort of once every how many years?
Once in 3. Basically, we do it in the fall after wheat and before corn next year.
And we don't always do everything ahead of corn. There are fields we come right out of bean stubble and just go right to corn. We will inject it with the air seeder on 7.5-inch spacing and then just plant over top of it. Just depends how the fall goes and what we feel we need to do. We don't always need to go aggressively tear up the fields. Sometimes it's just a matter of just slice it in and just leave everything alone.
And it's still not sort of what I would call wall-to-wall tillage, right? Because you're very concentrated on where you're putting it and the wheel traffic, and then where the corn is going to be planted in where the big shanks are and stuff like that.
More for us, we already own the machine. It was a matter of, I don't even think we put $500 into converting the machine to hook on because we already owned it. Whereas, yes, it'd be nice to try strip tillage, but the cost to go there is just a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, eventually we'd like to try that. And the cart is set up to do it. It's hard to justify spending $180,000 on a strip till implement of any substantial width.
So you use what I'm going to call a deep fertilizer ripper on the back of the sulfur tanks, and then in the spring, what's the tillage operation to get that ready to plant?
Ideally, what we would like to do is once we're done ripping, take the cultivator to get everything level and just leave it, come back in the spring, put our fertilizer down like our liquid and plant it. We will wait till we have a emerged crop, somewhere around the 5-6 leaf, do our herbicide program and walk away from it. And the only time we would be back is for a fungicide application at tassel. We shouldn't be in there that often.
And in a given year, what percentage of the fields that you farm do you think are getting tillage?
Mainly just our cornfields, if it's anything. And even it depended how the fall went. If we had a nice fall where we can do a good job, yes, we did a bunch. If we didn't, well, the air seeder's just got a lot more work to do in the spring. It's going to go through and put all our dry down. We're going to just slice it in and then plant it, and we're going to leave it alone.
The air seeder will do a certain amount of tillage, which will make it, the field a lot more presentable as far as planting. And as far as 20-inch rows, when we plant soybeans and corn stalks, we just move over 10 inches. We're driving on the stalks. We're not driving on bean rows. Yeah, there's a real tender moment. We're waiting for the weather to improve, waiting for the fields to dry, and it's really easy to get on there just that day or two too early, and you will see that in July.
So when you think of the no-till side of things, it's not just the planter. What are the other components like we have that set yourselves up to be able to do no-till effectively? Like how important is residue management to you, and how important is, getting all that equipment through the shop every winter and stuff like that?
It's not necessarily about having the newest, latest, and greatest. It's about having a sharp planter more than anything. Um, First thing is, when you combine, if you don't get it spread out, you just fight gobs of trash, and it'll haunt you. We see it in the wheat. Just the simple thing of coming to a dead stop mid-pass with the combine, it'll show up in the wheat next year. Like, we try our hardest. Even the grain cart can do it to you, and no one means to do it on purpose. When the grain cart comes to the end, don't slam on the brakes. Let the combine get out on the headland and finish spreading everything out, because that gob shows up, and it's there. Just a simple thing as that, like taking care of the residue. And then the next thing is try not to make a mess of the place. Try not to rut it up.
Okay. And how important is the having cover crops in that system to make the no-till side of the equation work? Could you do no-till without having the cover crop as part of that equation on your types of soils?
You probably could, because you're not really in Brookston Clay. You're not experiencing that much of a blow like on the sand farms where the sand picks up and goes. The cover crop just gives you some roots down there, so that next year's roots will follow them. And we've done some diggings where we found worms, or also roots from the present crop following some of our cover crop roots. But we also don't want a big, heavy cover crop on that field. Like, the worst thing in the spring is to have 2 feet of cover crop. Uh, you'll never get that field to dry out. You know, you can kink rye as supposedly, and I know it's done well by some people, but for us, we find it doesn't work out well. If we kink the rye, the ground's still too wet down there, and that really affects the germ and the development of the new crop. We're better off to see 6 inches of oats and the odd radish that are dead. The frost has taken them out. We don't have to pay the sprayer to come in and knock them out. They're out, and we can, with our equipment, we can cut through there and plant whatever we want.
So, being that you're farming mostly clay, and that's sort of, most people would think no-till and clay don't go together very well, but you've done very well at making that happen. Is there a generational difference between you in terms of this important quotient that a farmer has to have to do no-till, and that concept of patience in terms of, getting in there in the spring and doing what you have to do when it's right?
Well, I don't think there's a real big jump in patience, because sometimes I would say, yeah, maybe we should try, we should try it. And Jeremy said, it's too wet. I already, been across with the sprayer or whatever. It's still too wet. So, we have, but that patience part is important, because you will see it later on in the timing, where you're looking at green streaks, and then you see yellowing streaks where we've actually compacted the soil because it's been a little bit damp.
In terms of the no-till program, what are the implements that make up that system?
It's a decent planner that you can work with to get it to do what you want. GPS makes a big difference, especially for the program we're trying to achieve, because we want to plant back between the rows and try and do a nice job. A good sprayer, the bigger the boom, the better, to a point. I'll say, like, the sprayer we have this year to the one we had last year is 10,000 pounds heavier. I am running a taller tire, and it is a better weight spread. I went from a 70 30 weight split, 70% on the rear axle to a 60-40. So as far as my compaction, it's probably only a little higher because I'm pushing more to the front axle, but still that 120-foot boom is one heavy piece of equipment. That being said, being that it is 120 feet, yeah, sometimes maybe we shouldn't, but we do cheat. It's like, okay, it is touch tacky. We've got trash to ride on. We're just going to go spray and we're not going to do anything else.
Rain's coming.
Yeah, it's kind of a rain's coming, but it's also like, okay, if we go in, and it's not always right, if we go in today, we spray it, in 3 days it'll be dead, we can go. It's kind of, we're flirting with the window a little bit, but the weight of the machine does concern me. It is heavy.
And what did you change tires width-wise too, or you kind of?
We were running a 380/90/46. Now we're running a 380/90/54. Yeah, so a 54 is not a factory option for our machine. A lot of guys are getting them. They're ordering them aftermarket. That part of that is so we can spray corn. It gets the extra height. It's a longer footprint without going wide. We cannot go any wider. We are very tightly squeezed in our rows. We've spent some money on some GPS programs that help improve us from running over stuff. It's helped a lot. Still got a lot to learn with the program. I think as far as the people writing the program, they got a little ways to go with it too. It's come a long ways. It's a huge step from just straight turning the auto steer on and just letting it go down the field.
So of the no-till system in general, can you sort of say that the planter is the #1 piece of equipment, or is it just a piece of the puzzle?
It is a piece of it. You can do the best job planting, but if you do a crap job spreading the residue or controlling the weeds, it's all useless.
So it really is a systems that needs to be in place.
You gotta have a good practice and you gotta be on top of some stuff. And timing just as much as anything too. There's lots of things we'd like to do, but there's a lot of times it's the weather won't let us do it, so we just got to walk away from the project. Buckwheat this year is a classic case. Yeah, it'd be nice to have it all in, but the machine's not even hooked up because we see no chance of getting it in timely. And the other problem is the later we go, we had a season I went to go desiccate it. It was cold and windy, and even after 3 weeks, there's still a lot of green in the plant. It was kind of it was a struggle to harvest it. It was almost pointless at that point. So the sooner we can go, the better. Yeah, it's if we can do it. It's not, yeah, this is our set practice. It's if we can get to it.
So when you think about the no-till acres and trying to make that system work, where are the biggest hurdles, Henry, that you've experienced over the course of since the 80s when you started down this road?
It always has been fertilizer management, trying to figure out, how are we going to get the fertilizer on there. And, we've had an air seeder around here for over 20 years. It's been rebuilt umpteen different times, and sometimes just selecting what you're going to use as far as closing wheels and shoes and stuff like that will make the biggest difference. Again, planting fertilizer is just like planting. It's got to be fit. You can't plant in the mud. It's got to do a good job. So if we can get some done in the fall, that's great. Our ripper that we've put together, it's great because it will set up that trench to put fertilizer. And what people don't really understand is the incorporation tube where the fertilizer is coming out, that's way up on top of the shank. So it's blowing down the sides of the trench, in the trench. So we've got a full range of fertilizer right from the surface down to whatever depth we've got it set at. And that's important because it'll grow by some of that, but it'll start striving or reaching to go deeper. And that's a good way to place a couple of years worth of fertilizer at once. And that's why it's basically a 1 in 3 cycle. We don't have to worry about, it's got to do it every year.
And Jeremy, another hurdle that a lot of people worry about in trying to adopt no-till is this aspect of delayed planting, slow emergence, uneven crops. What's your experience with what you've done no-till wise? here, across the different crops?
It's all about the same. It's going to average out. There are a lot of years we get moving, we're well into things, and then some of these guys get rolling. But I think some of these guys that plow have created a hard pan, and it's harder to drain the waterway. And whatever, to each their own. That's their decided practice. That's up to them. But delay, not necessarily.
Do you think that you're losing anywhere in no-till, again, compared to the neighbors that are tilling and stuff like that? Profitability, timing, labor, that type of thing. Is there any place where you're losing by devoting the time to the no-till?
I'm glad we don't do conventional because it'd take about 3 or 4 more people, a couple more tractors, a couple more implements. Our overhead cost for running this program is a lot less and it's a lot simpler. We're not trying to manage multiple people every day, check multiple machines, get them going. It's just there's 3 of us or 4 of us during the day and that's it. And we're covering a decent amount of ground. We don't have a massive fuel bill. We don't have massive consumable bills on tillage equipment. We have big consumable bills on our planters because there are a lot of parts we get a year or two and they're toast. They're just wore right out.
And that's more so because of your soil type as well, correct?
Yeah, and there are times it is like planting into a driveway. It is hard. It's just the nature of doing no-till. Yes, we maybe take a little bit of a yield hit, but when you add it all up, it's probably going to just be about the same. Just because you can flash a 70 bushel yield because you went and roll over plowed everything, but let's go back to what did it cost you?
Where are you winning by this system? And you kind of just described that, Jeremy, in terms of the equipment base that you have to have, the labor place and such.
Yeah, we have one barn here and it fits our fleet. And there's only a few of us around that we have to deal with each other and that's it. It's not a lot of people we're trying to coordinate. It's simple.
And Henry, in all the time that we've talked together, you've always talked about how important the water side of things are to you personally, and the no-till sort of helps you achieve that.
Oh, the no-till, the fact that there's residue on top of the field that we're able to plant through, but that residue helps keep surface water cleaner when it's running off. Helps it even helps in the tiles because the roots channels are there. They're decaying and water's going through them towards the tile. The overall soil health is definitely one step ahead. We're happy with it. There's always going to be that one field that can really annoy you, but uh, you know, overall, it's a plus plus.
So, you've got tillage partially in the system and that, but in terms of the overall approach, would you ever go back to the old way of doing things?
No, not interested. I would like to try strip tillage, a focused tillage program strictly for corn. Uh, there are times we don't need to be sending the ripper through. It's more for us, we're trying to do a focused fertilizer application and I'd like to do it in a less aggressive way. A lot of these sites that just don't need it. Some of the fields you saw us doing last fall, they needed aggressive tillage because they were just hard and neglected pieces of dirt that just needed some reclamation and correcting.
And neglected from the standpoint of they were new pieces of land that you picked up from others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're more likely to do the tillage in those fields than in sort of ones that you've been managing a long time, recognizing, Henry, that you said there are some fields that are just wet and it is what it is.
We do see an improvement as we slowly do go through these. We have to do them a little more regularly, but there's other ones I just assume maybe be a little bit wider with a strip tiller up to like a 20-foot to match our increments because we're 9 shanks on 20s. So that's 15-foot increment and trying to get everything to all line up. There's a little bit of complication or just something a little wider, less passes, less like this thing's not light. The tanks alone can hold 20,000 pounds of material and it's sitting, I'm going to say about 70% sitting on this axle and then the other 30 sitting on the tractor. The less passes we need to do, the better with it. We do have our weight spread out, but I think going to a little bit of strip tillage for a focused tillage plan is a plan that we'd like to achieve.
And just as we finish up here, both of you, because of your generational gap again, what is the advice that you would give to others on how to start exploring no-till in their operations?
Well, I guess the first thing, if you own a plow, you need to park that, and trying to work without moldboard plowing. Whether spraying. I think the biggest part of the program is spraying. We do a lot of fall spraying to make it a lot easier to get on that field in the spring. The last thing you want is a level, dirty field, even though it has some residue, and then now you have to deal with it because that residue and those weeds are going to keep that soil moist, and that's going to leave tracks. So the biggest thing is, you need to have an established plan. You need to say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to spray for, make sure I don't have any weeds in the fall. I need a clean slate. Start with something clean. And probably the easiest to no-till are soybeans and wheat. The soybeans, it's gotta be a little bit patient sometime. And wheat, the biggest thing, that is one way to put some fertilizer down, because you can put the fertilizer, a certain amount, with the wheat, whether you have to mix it all together or run a 2-tank system like we do here.
Jeremy?
I'm not saying abandon your plans when things don't go right, but if you can't do it right, just leave it alone. A lot of times, like, that's the consequences of pushing things too much. Just because in the fall we want to go rip everything prepped for corn, it's not going to work. Just leave the machine home, and next spring do what you need to get by. Like, we'll go back next spring when we're planting. We'll just apply our fertilizer then. If it just isn't going to work, just don't try and push it, because it's just going to haunt you. You'll see it for 2 years at least.
I just want to say, on behalf of those that will see this series on no-tilling across the province, thank you to Jeremy and Henry for taking the time to share your experience and thoughts with us. And it's been a pleasure to be working with you the last year or so on this, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ian. Thanks for the challenges, because I know sometimes we get talking about something and you'll look at me and say, "Are you sure?" Which is always, that's always a good thing.
Yep. Awesome.